This is Duke University.
So, Jim, I'm going to start just by asking you to talk a little bit about the Rubenstein Fellowship itself, and how it's been and how it's helped you formulate what you want to do on the topic of energy access.
Sure. First of all, it was a great opportunity in so many different ways for me, not just in the context of the book and developing the idea, but it was great fun for me to partner with Tim and the both of us to co-teach this course. And I was laughing with somebody at lunch saying, after 25 years as a CEO, I'm so used to when I'm getting ready to do something to turn around and ask someone on the team to put together the first draft. And then as we started working together on this, Tim and I realized, and I realized in a very acute way, I had no one to turn to. And so it created a whole new sort of, yes, I once was a lawyer, and yes, I can still write, and yes, I was a reporter, and yes, I can still do this. But that was sort of challenging in itself, because quite frankly, no one at the university and no one at any university in the United States has taught a course about renewables and world poverty. And so it really gave us an opportunity to develop the material. It gave us an opportunity to kind of craft a series of narratives that we worked through during the course of the semester. The other thing that we did to try to make it real is that we broke the students into 4 different groups, and we really asked each of them to put together a business plan to provide electricity in remote villages in 4 parts of the world: in Cambodia, Indonesia, because we wanted an island culture because it would be applicable to other islands around the world, India, and in Nigeria. And the consequence of that is that some of the students said to us that Tim and I were more demanding on the business plan than the professors were in the business school, because we really asked them to put together real plans, make assumptions, as if they're going to go into this village and build it out. And they each had a different approach to it. I thought it was a great exercise. I was so impressed with the students. They're such great critical thinkers. And it was a fun class. The other part of what I've done in this role, I should say with the students, I kind of offered up, Tim told me to be careful about this because this could be a monster that would eat me. But I basically offered up to the students an opportunity to meet with them one-on-one and talk about kind of their careers and things like that. And they did. I mean, a lot of them came to me and had 2 internships, for instance, and asked me to think through which of the 2 would be the best option for them in terms of developing their career after they shared with me where they were going. They asked me questions about work family, and since I was a total failure at that, I was able to give them kind of a list of things not to do. And then we got into, it was really great. I mean, I felt at one point that I should be a priest, because I got a lot of really interesting personal conversations that came out of these one-on-ones. And it was really a rich experience for me in so many ways. The other thing that we did is that I really asked the students, I said, I'll buy dinner or lunch and put a group together and let's go have lunch and dinner on a topic. And so virtually everybody in the class took us up on that. And that was great fun and really had robust conversations. And I've really got to enjoy everybody in the class. The last thing I'll say is that while I've been here, I've been able to speak, do presentations, do lectures on really a wide range of things, from in the business school, focused on energy, in the law school. Just the other day in the engineering school, I taught did a lecture on renewables and the role that they're playing in the US and the role that, in my judgment, that they'll play in the future. Got into everything from net metering with respect to solar on the rooftop to utility scale solar, lots of great issues. And so this idea of having a university fellow, not tied to one school, but given the ability to work in all the different schools, I think is a great innovation by Duke, and I've really enjoyed it. And actually the people in the administration has told me that my goal line is to really to do so much that whoever comes next is really going to have to work hard. And so Tim has done a good job of keeping me busy. All the different schools have, and I think it's been a great experience. And I would certainly recommend it to anybody because it's just so many different levels that you have an opportunity to interact and try to make a difference.
When you came to Duke, when we first started talking about the idea of taking this fellowship, you already had this passion that you knew one of the things you wanted to do with your year at Duke was focus on this challenge, the challenge of electricity to the rural parts of Africa, to the rural parts of India. Where did that source from? I mean, you were running one of the largest utilities, if not the largest utility in the world. You were dealing very much with the first world. Somehow you became very focused on the person in rural Tanzania who had no access to power. And how did that transition happen in your thinking?
Now, as y'all know, in life, there's not one bolt of lightning. You don't have a dream and wake up and say, I'm going to do this. But a series of things kind of came together. Let me just briefly kind of link them. I had a chance to take my wife and I took 4 of our grandchildren to Kenya. And I wanted to make it a trip that's not just focused on a safari experience, but I also wanted them to have a cultural experience. So we ended up renting a couple of helicopters and going to all these different villages throughout Kenya, different tribes, and had a guide to really help us talk through before we went and share the experience in each of those. And I thought it was very good for my grandchildren to really kind of see what the world's like. And in the course of one of the village, there was a guy there that had a cell phone. He actually had an Obama t-shirt on, and my dad. And I started talking with him through the translator, and I said, I don't see any power lines around here. How do you charge your cell phone? And he said, well, essentially, I walk 3 hours, I pay somebody to charge it, and I walk back to the village. And that sort of triggered, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then as I went to every village, I realized nobody had access to electricity in these villages. And that actually triggered a memory of when I was a young CEO. I read Robert Cairo's book about Lyndon Johnson. I've really loved political stories. And there's a chapter in there where they talks about how it transformed the lives of women in Texas when they brought electricity, because during the early 30s, only one farmhouse in America had access to electricity. And it told the story of how their lives were changed as a consequence of it. It's a very moving story. And when I read it as a young CEO, all of a sudden, kind of the lights went on, because I grew up when access to electricity wasn't a problem. Everybody had electricity. All of a sudden, as a young CEO, I got to go, I now know what this purpose is. I know what the mission is. I know how transformative what I do is. And it kind of brought it to light for me. But I remember that, and then I sat down with a friend and over the Christmas holiday, and we co-founded a foundation that started out philanthropically, later became kind of a market approach to it. But bottom line is we focused on providing solar lanterns that also charge cell phones. And we really lead the US today in the distribution of this type of solar lantern. We've distributed over 70,000. We've had every kind of problem you can have in terms of government seizing them, in terms of tariffs on top of them that made them even more expensive for people in the rural areas. So that set of experiences around that foundation led to even greater interest. And then I had the good fortune of chairing this Global Sustainability Electricity Partners, which is a group of the 11 largest energy companies, both state-owned enterprises and private companies around the world. And I made this access issue the theme of my chairmanship. And as a consequence of that, one of the projects we worked on was in Patagonia, a small village called Cochico, only had electricity 4 hours a day from a generator. And it was a rural school that where kids from this region came and stayed 3 weeks and went home for a week. So what I did is raise money from some of the 11 utilities, and we built a micro hydro, and connected it. And at the end of the day, we left the village with 24/7 electricity, which to me was kind of a transformative exercise in terms of what could get done. And so those two experiences really started me on the road of saying, wow, there's 1.2 billion people with no access. I mean, that's 1 out of 5 people in the world that wake up in the morning and can't throw the switch on anything. And then I started thinking, wow, that number is about equivalent to the number of people that existed on our planet when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. And I said, this is a huge challenge. Why is it? Because in the US, universal access to electricity by the National Academy of Engineers said that was the greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century. Every home and business had access. And yet around the world, 1.2 billion don't. Why? And that got me on a journey of trying to figure out, well, why is that? What happened in these other countries? And actually the math is pretty interesting. There's 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa, 400 million in India, 70 million in Indonesia, 30 million in the Amazon areas of Latin America that don't have access. And actually, this is the last thing I'll say, is what I discovered, there is just incredible blind spot about this fact. Let me tell you what I mean. It's a blind spot because when the UN put their Millennium Development Goals together in 2000, they didn't include access to electricity as one of their goals. Yet every one of their goals required electricity to be achieved, because actually access to electricity is foundational. Then I started reading Collier's book On the Bottom of the Pyramid, and I read all these other books on lifting people from poverty in developing countries. And what I was struck by and actually stunned by, no one ever referenced access to electricity as a key to economic development, or a key to education, or a key to medical care, or a key to moving into the 21st century, where the internet is going to increasingly be important in the context of education, healthcare, employment. Actually, political thinking is going to be driven by access to the internet. And so as I started thinking about this, I'm saying, how if so many people miss this? Now, I'm happy to report that the UN is going to probably, when they put together their Sustainable Development Goals for in 2015, access to electricity is probably going to be included. The other thing that I've noticed in the process of working on this is how much momentum is starting to develop, but it's very episodic, and there's not a concerted effort yet to really address the issue. So let me stop with that. I mean, that was a kind of a long answer, but the blind spot about this, I was just struck by it. And I think part of the reason is we in the developed world take electricity for granted. It is so back of mind. It's only 1.7% of our disposable income, what we pay for it. We just don't, when we think of problems in the developing world, we just don't think about that. And I think that's the only explanation I have for why we haven't included it or taken meaningful action to make a difference.
Let me ask one more question here. You've had this exploration with Duke. You've developed your thing on it. We're now talking about building something bigger at Duke, building an energy access project and a focal program on it that the Nicholas Institute will be a partner in. Why Duke? What is it you've seen in your year that makes you think that we've got the right platform for you to be able to have the impact you're looking to have on this project?
I think the thing that, every university kind of talks about this, but nobody does it like Duke. Every university talks about breaking down silos from the different schools and getting people to work across kind of on projects, from the business school, from public policy, from environmental science, and work on a project. Everybody talks that they do it, but Duke really does it. And just the simple fact that the class that we taught had students from all those schools, it actually mimics real world. Because in a corporation, you got people from all different disciplines sitting around the table trying to solve a problem. In government, you have people from all these disciplines sitting around. And I've been to other schools. I've taught a little bit, as you know, at Harvard, in the business school. And the bottom line is, everything is locked down. You don't really step out it's hard to get that cross-disciplinary approach to problems. And so I thought Duke does it really well. And actually, to solve this problem, it's going to take business ideas, it's going to take engineering, it's going to take public policy. I mean, government policy is a huge impediment in each of these countries. And it's something that we have to persuade people to endorse and persuade people to implement. And so at the end of the day, Duke is uniquely positioned to do that.